Thanks for checking out my video on Radiant Black Issue 4. I'd just like to preface that some crazy things go down, and by the end of it, we're stuck with more questions than answers. And the story from here on out is fair game with where it can go. Anyways, here's the video. In a cold open, Nathan wakes up naked in another plane of existence. The radiant entity shows up behind Nathan and says,
"Hello, Nathan Burnett. It is good to see you."
But Nathan replies that he can't understand what's being said, to which the entity replies,
"You will soon. We are engaging in the process of sync. Shall we take the next step?"
The entity then appears and towers before Nathan, and we finally see the giant being clearly. In English, the giant robot says,
"Welcome to existence."
We then cut to Marshall at his place when he gets a text from Nathan. Nathan asks if he's up for a training session. Marshall replies with, "About time." They meet up in the forest where Marshall sets up some targets. He speculates that Nathan probably has energy blasts, recalling the very first night when Nathan built up energy right before he calmed down. Nathan agrees and shoots an energy blast. In a cool Easter egg, the targets that Marshall sets up are figures or characters from Kyle Higgins' other work, Cowl. Marshall pries at Nathan over the sudden training session. Nathan explains that these powers came from somewhere and that maybe that somewhere will come looking for them, so he'll need to be ready in case. Nathan adds that he's been seeing and communicating with a giant robot too. Marshall reassures Nathan that he'll be ready and that he has more potential. Marshall reasons to Nathan that perhaps stronger emotions can evoke a stronger blast. Marshall then starts to jeer at Nathan, but nothing works until he says, "Justine would still be around if you knew how to conjugate." Which really strikes a nerve and does the job of invoking a huge blast. The two call it a day and walk off for movies and a beer. We next see the continued conversation between Nathan and the robot. The robot tells Nathan that their connection is permanent until Nathan's death. It then gives Nathan a deadly warning. The Radiant is coming and will kill everything and everyone on Earth. The robot then asks Nathan a heavy question.
"Will you take his life?"
We are now given the over-encompassing conflict of the story. A future battle awaits Nathan. Who is the Radiant? Why does he have beef with the Earth? And more importantly, is Nathan willing to take a life? We don't get Nathan's answer. Instead, we cut to our friends walking and bringing up some great questions. Nathan asks Marshall how he thinks things would have played out if it was Marshall that grabbed the black hole. In a relatable moment, Marshall explains how he has countless ideas with what he would have done with the powers, and understandably digs into Nathan for lacking vision. Nathan says he's just being cautious. I like Nathan, but Marshall is right. It's grueling to see someone glacially get into the superhero life. Marshall tells Nathan that he should be doing more. Interestingly, Marshall tells Nathan that there's a lot of things he's willing to do that Nathan isn't. Radiant Red suddenly crashes in on them and greets Nathan by name. Red grabs and throws Nathan, and as he flies through the air, he transforms. Marshall takes out his phone and gets ready to upload to WorldStar when Red takes his phone and starts to absorb it. Red tells Marshall to beat it, or he'll absorb his skin and leave his muscles and guts spilling out. I guess Red can absorb organic material after all. Radiant Black grabs the distracted Red and sends him ricocheting off buildings and onto a rooftop. Radiant Black follows him to the rooftop where we see Red absorbing material. Red comes out of the rubble with light armor on his arms. Is this what their absorbing does? Anyways, Red plows Black through the multi-storied building. Red goes into a monologue about how he knows who Nathan is and where his friends and family live, and how Red can hurt Nathan publicly, privately, and personally. Bad move on Red's part, because we just learned that Nathan's powers are strongly influenced by the intensity of his emotions. Radiant Black hits Red with the biggest blast we've seen so far, and it was enough to bring Red down to his knees with his armor cracked badly. As Black stands over Red, we cut to Nathan back in the void. The last time we saw Nathan here was when the robot asked Nathan if he was willing to kill to save the Earth. Nathan's disappointed expression heavily implies he isn't. We cut back to the fight and we see more evidence that Nathan isn't willing to take a life when he just tells Red to never come back and he walks away. Red retaliates with an energy blast, but Radiant Black answers back with his own. The blasts collide and the explosion causes the integrity of the building to fall apart. Nathan showcases another use of his powers when he holds up the building with stasis. He yells at Red to hold something up. To my surprise, Red actually helps Nathan keeping up the building. Unfortunately, the building is still coming down. After Nathan ensures that everyone is out of the building, he tells Red to get out too, and actually blasts him out of the building where he's safe. The building collapses on top of Nathan as Marshall watches in horror. Marshall runs into the rubble and starts to dig. He finds Nathan, but the radiant suit is retroceding. In the chaos, we cut back to the void where we see Nathan's answer. He doesn't respond verbally, but his body language tells the robot that Nathan is not willing to kill, and so he tells Nathan,
"Then your world will die."
We cut to Marshall over Nathan's body, where he yells that Nathan isn't breathing and has no pulse. The black hole ascends from Nathan and appears before Marshall, confirming Nathan is dead. The robot begins to speak to Marshall and tells him of impending war. Now Marshall is in the void, standing before the robot. The robot proposes the same question to Marshall, and he answers yes. The last thing we see is Marshall reaching out and grabbing the Radiant. There's a lot to talk about here, but first we can add new powers to Radiant Black's abilities. We can also add a new character, sort of. The central focus now is the confrontation between Radiant Black and the aforementioned Radiant. There's tons of speculation on who or what this could be, but I'm not good at accurate predictions, so I'll let you guys do that in the comments or on the subreddit. The thing that shadows all of this, however, is Nathan's death. The title of this issue is Everything Changes, and since we're at the beginning of the series, this may be a legit death. One speculation I do have, however, is that the story may now be about Marshall being forced to mature and evolve from the goofball best friend role into a hero who has to use their powers for a greater responsibility. A character arc I personally haven't seen before. That being said, I like Nathan. We saw his struggles and battles over the last few issues, and just to see them and his development gone is really weird. This is comics, so Nathan probably isn't dead, but I think he's going to be benched for a good while before he's revived or something. Whatever the direction is going for, I'm all for it. Thanks for watching, guys, and let me know what y'all think. Is Nathan actually dead? Was this a story beat just for shock factor, or do you trust the writers to deliver on the story? Anyways, peace out, y'all.